The world does not end with a bang, but a whimper. When the world's serpent rises, Ragnarok will commence at the hands of gods and monsters. Hold the head steady now, Mr. Crow. I don't want to cock this up. Swelling waves cause the ship to roll beneath my feet as I do my best to follow Professor Oleg's order. Unfortunately, the ox is not all that cooperative. It pulls against the rope securely fastened to the ring through its nose while emitting low panicked bellows, its eyes rolling wildly within their large sockets. Penned in the makeshift stable below deck, there's nowhere for the beast to run, even if it wasn't currently on a large vessel somewhere in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, several hundred miles away from the nearest thing resembling land. Something had the beast terrified, although it could be that it simply senses the harsh intentions of the striking woman standing in front of it with an air gun. Oh, for fuck's sake, Daniel, I know that you can pull a rope much tighter than that. I've got the fucking burns on my wrists to prove it. I flash Helen a glare as I struggle with the rope all over again, my cheeks flushing bright red from equal parts anger and embarrassment. She responds with a wicked, sexy grin. It is no secret at all among friends here that Helen and I are sleeping together. It's how I was conned into going on this little cruise in the first place, but I still don't feel the need to blatantly parade the fact around in front of her father. Dr. Reynard Oleg is a visiting professor out of Oslo whose entire expertise is in cryptozoology. I hadn't realized that such a degree even existed at all, but apparently I'm not all that informed as I had initially thought myself to be. The Loch Ness Monster, the Wendigo, the Tatzelwerk. Oleg has dedicated years of his life to studying and even cataloging the stories and the legends of all of these, as well as dozens of other fantastic creatures, going so far as to conduct extensive field research into claims of their initial existence. Due to his lean, sharp features, surprisingly cunning intellect, and most probably his parents' choice of strange names, Oleg has been dubbed the Fox after the French fable in pretty much every circle that he dares to inhabit. His daughter Helen serves as his primary research assistant and as such is accompanying him for the duration of his stay over at Pecatonic University, where I am currently studying for my own doctorate in engineering. His raven black hair and his oddly shaped eyes, steel gray, flecked over with purple, give her an exotic, if decidedly un-Nordic, appearance. Still, she has the muscle tone of an Olympic gymnast, and at 5'10", she could easily be imagined falling into the high ranks of the fabled Valkyrie. I first spotted Helen at a social mixer last fall and was immediately taken. Imagine my shock when my lame attempts to talk with her were accepted and even encouraged a little bit, and 2 weeks later, we were both fucking each other like it was a thing that was going out of style. Our relationship stayed on that course for about 6 months when she informed me that she would be going with her father for an extended trip during the summer as part of his elaborate research. Would I like to accompany them? The fact that she'd been naked when she asked me this probably helped guide my decision on this set course. That is how I came to be wrangling a terrified ox on a Korean manning fishing vessel just 600 miles off the Japanese coastline. Wrapping the rope more firmly around my hands, I brace my foot against the bulkhold and pull as hard as I can, momentarily arresting the panicked animal's movements. Hit it! Jesus, hit it now! Helen professionally places the air gun between the ox's eyes and smoothly depresses the trigger, punching a tiny metal rod through skin and bone and deep into the creature's tiny brain. Its eyes roll back in its mouth before the ox collapses to its knees and finally slumps to the floor on its side. I disentangle myself from the rope, angry red depressions crisscrossing my hands and up my arms, and I wipe the sweat from my forehead. Christ, I've never done this before, but I mean, don't they usually use a cattle prod or something to stun these fuckers first? The fox gives me a pinched look. In your typical slaughterhouse, yes, Mr. Crow, they do, but I've come to find out that it is best to avoid using electricity whenever possible in these harsh matters. There can be some rather unforeseen complications when done so. Besides, certain research suggests that the chemicals released in the brain due to intense fear serve as something of an intoxicating marinade for some of the more predatory creatures. All for the better for our purposes here, I admit. Stunning the gracious beast beforehand could very well provide us of a potential advantage. Helen, if you would please. Exchanging her air gun for an enormous bone saw, Helen enters the pen and begins working on the dead ox's neck. The metal teeth slide through muscle and tissue as Helen manipulates the saw as smoothly as a lumberjack might a gigantic tree trunk. It catches briefly when it hits vertebrae, but then she pulls the blade free with a sickening cracking noise of snapping bone before repositioning and continuing her grisly procedure. I feel my gourds rise to the base of my throat and glance down at the floor only to leap away from the slowly growing pool of blood that has spread from the pen and now threatens to soak my boots completely through. I hastily move away from the danger zone and turn my eyes from the sadistic butchery, desperately wishing that I could turn off the squelching sounds as easily. So, Doc, tell me again exactly what we're doing all the way out here. Oleg sighs. As I have explained in thorough detail already, Mr. Crow, we are in search of Jormungandr, the world serpent, as he is better known in Norse mythos. Most likely, it and the creature known as the Leviathan in Christian traditions are one and the same. Legend has it, the beast is so large that it can encircle the world, so far to the point of holding its own tail within its own mouth, although that is highly likely of an over-exaggerated expression. According to Norse mythology, however, when Jormungandr releases its tail, it will initiate Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. During the fierce final battle, the great world serpent will confront its father Loki's sworn and most hated of enemies, Thor, the god of thunder, resulting in their mutual destruction. All of my dedicated research indicates that the creature's head will be located somewhere in this vicinity, near the Mariana Trench, of all places. As the lowest point of the entire planet and one of the few environments not fully explored by humans, it is the most likely location that a creature that awesomely large could remain so relatively undetected. And it's quite a fan of oxen roast, is it? I asked. Oleg glares at me. Yes, in fact. In one of the most commonly artistically rendered stories, Thor managed to accidentally capture Jormungandr on his hook, which he had baited with an ox head. He attempted to kill the world serpent with his mighty hammer Mjolnir, but the great oaf that he is managed to let Jormungandr escape instead. We are attempting to recreate this very event. But Professor, what exactly are you planning to do if you actually manage to catch this creature? Finished! Beaming, Helen hefts the severed ox head to her shoulder. Her hands and her face are spattered with crimson, and a slow trickle of blood continues to seep from the stump of the creature's neck to drip to the floor below. Her strange, speckled eyes are alight with excitement and anticipation. Excellent, my dear. Now let's get our bait up to the main deck. Ignoring my question entirely, the fox turns and leads the way up the stairs, his daughter Helen following closely and carrying her macabre prize. I stay a little behind and glance back at the pen. The ox's body remains slumped where it had fallen, the muscles of the legs twitching and herking ever so slightly as the onset of rigor mortis slowly takes firm hold of it. I involuntarily shudder and turn after the good professor and his beautiful daughter. Once out on deck, I move to the fore of the ship where Oleg and Helen are already baiting an enormous meat hook with the severed ox head still dripping blood and ichor. The hook is in turn rigged to a large crane that Oleg had installed specifically for this one excursion. Helen works the controls as Oleg glides the grotesque lure over the side and slowly lowers it into the calm seas below. So what do we do now, Professor? I inquire. Now, the fox smiles cruelly. We wait. And wait we do. For weeks, the seas are calm. The skies are completely clear. Every few days, we repeat the exercise below deck with another terrified ox as the seawater rapidly rots the heads to a state where I doubt that even a fabled monster would find them appetizing. By the fifth time in our rehearsal, I find that I have become quite proficient with my duties. I do not know if I am all that pleased by this fact, though. One day is soon lost in the next, with little to distinguish them apart from one another, other than the occasional morning slaughter. Our Korean crew tends to the basic needs of the ship, and they generally keep to themselves, leaving us to our own devices. My few brief encounters with individual sailors convey that they are a surly lot of fellows. Something tells me they all feel very little goodwill towards us, though. Strange work here frightens these people, and it is likely that Oleg is paying them double their regular rate that they are out here at all. Still, money only manages to go so far, and I wonder not for the first time if the Fox has been as completely transparent with his plans to the captain and the crew as he has with me. I mean, it's just as likely that the sailors all mind their own business, as Oleg is highly adamant that only he and Helen operate our makeshift lair. This only makes for some extremely long days for the both of them, though, and yet it is only due to mere necessity that he even reluctantly allows me to participate in the preparation of our grotesque bait. As for myself, the biggest threat to contend with is the growing tedium and the ever-reaching boredom of all of this. Each day, the merciless sun beats down upon the deck out of a completely cloudless skyline, the seas perfectly calm and clear as smooth glass. This far out from land, there are not even any birds that one can watch, and other than the occasional dark spot on the horizon, the existence of land is only a steadily fading memory. Oleg and Helen both are completely absorbed in their fierce work, and neither of them are in any mood at all to socialize. One evening, in desperation, I consider trying to sit in on the sailors' nightly card game to help break up some of the rising monotony, but the malicious looks that I receive from my own welcome as I start toward the group send me hastily retreating to my cabin below. Lying there, feeling the gentle shifting of the ship beneath me and bored almost to tears, I wonder if I can convince the Fox to let me cut off the next ox's head. Gradually, the mood of our little research party grows increasingly tense and prickly, mirroring that of the crew. Tempers are short, and more than once innocent remarks erupt into full-out arguments with one another. Although we share a bunk together, Helen has stopped sleeping with me, the stress of the long voyage tempering our previously insatiable libidos. Lying beside her during the few hours that we try to rest up, I feel the gentle rise and fall of her breathing underneath my arm, and I wonder what this trip will ultimately mean for our relationship. Our supply of oxen is quickly dwindling now. If we don't find this mythical creature soon, then we will be forced to turn back with empty hands. The question of what to do if we manage to actually hook this legendary snake still remains ominously unanswered. And at this point in the game, I am just hoping that we fail in our desperate trying search. Tonight, I wake only to find myself alone. The spot that Helen usually occupies beside me is still quite warm. She can't have been gone for a very long time, though. The ship seems to be rolling considerably more than normal, and I stumble across the cabin several times as I try to get myself dressed. Finally, pulling on my boots, I go off in search of Helen and Professor Oleg both. When I reach the deck, I notice that the skyline has turned completely dark. No light from stars or moon alike. Storm clouds far above seethe angrily, and the waves beneath respond in vicious kind, rocking the boat more and more violently beneath my feet. The crew has gathered into a tight crowd off to the side, surrounding their captain. I don't speak a lick of Korean, but it's obvious that they are all arguing and that he is attempting to talk them all down. Abruptly, one of the sailors steps forward and throws a haymaker, catching the captain square in his jaw. The man crumbles to the deck, and a general melee breaks out around his fallen body. Scanning the deck, it takes me a few moments to locate Oleg and Helen over near the crane. Seemingly oblivious to the weather and the battling seamen, the professor is standing at the rail, his gaze fixed heavily on the churning waters below while his daughter works the controls. I shove my way through knots of fighting sailors and struggle to make my way up to them as the ship continues to heave to and fro. The wind has picked up and new howls like a revenant banshee, so that I have to shout to be heard when I finally reach Oleg. Professor! I cut my hands up around my mouth to scream at the old man. It's not safe here. We have to get back down below. Freezing rain erupts from the heavens, the screaming winds whipping the drops across my face so hard that they actually sting. Lightning bolts the size of small houses flash down from the skyline, accompanied by peals of thunder so loud they make my head ring. Professor! I grab the old man by the shoulder and spin him around, only to fall back in shock. The man facing me now bears a resemblance to Oleg, certainly, but only just. He's much younger, his face holding an agelessness that makes him seem paradoxically youthful and ancient in equal amounts. His eyes are alight with the raw glow of madness. His mouth opens in a wolfish grin. Too late. He's far too late to stop me now. He giggles like a deranged lunatic. We have finally found it. Shrieking peals of laughter accompany him then, and I turn to where Helen was operating the controls. Gone is my stunning Valkyrie, replaced now by a hideous creature. Half of her body is covered in pale, perfect skin, the other rotting lumps of flesh the same purplish hue as the flecks in her gorgeous eyes. Her cackles are lost as the wind whips itself into even greater fury, the ship rocking so hard that I am possessed by the sheer terror of being capsized at any moment, all too soon. The boat is thrashing much too hard for me to even contemplate trying to make it back to the hold. Just as I have thought, an enormous wave crashes over the deck, sweeping several of the fighting sailors over the side. Their screams are quickly drowned by the raging storm, and they disappear beneath the waves. I spy a coil of rope stumbling across the deck. Desperately grabbing it, I manage to last myself between two cargo brackets. Helen was right. I pull the ropes very tight. Temporarily secure now, I look around frantically, my mind racing to comprehend the truth of the situation quickly unfolding. Astonishingly, the man who was once Oleg has jumped upon the bow, deftly riding the ship as if it's an enraged bronco in need of taming. Raising his arms toward the screaming heavens, he howls into the maddened storm. Come now, brother, he claims, meet your doom. With that, the largest wave, yes, slowly tilts the ship so that it is riding almost completely upon its side. From where I am lashed to the deck, I am now practically vertical and have a perfect view of the rolling waves disappearing far off into the horizon. In that moment alone, my mind breaks. From out of the sea protrude miles and miles of beautiful and glistening serpentine coils. The scales are the dull color of seaweed encrusted with barnacles and all manner of ocean life. An enormous head the size of a mountain erupts from the depths, blind white eyes fixed above a cavernous mouth that is glistening with dozens of rows of razor-sharp fangs. Opening its great maw wide, Leviathan lets loose a wild battle cry, its roar so loud that I feel my eardrums shatter within my skull. In the clouds far above, I barely make out a tiny figure of a man at the heart of the storm. Bolts of lightning seem to coalesce all around him, filling him with their impossible power. Shining like the sun, the figure streaks out of the sky like a falling comet, flying directly at the head of the world serpent, Thor, the god of thunder. The beast rears up to meet its foe, and on impact, the world is enveloped in an incredible blast of white light brighter than the core of an atomic bomb. The stress of the heaving sea is finally too much, and I feel the ship shatter beneath me. Slowly, the two broken halves descend into the seething waves. I struggle against the ropes securing me to the deck, but the wet knots slip in my fingers, the restraints that were only moments ago my salvation becoming my doom in the merest instant. Flailing about for something that I might use to cut the ropes with, my fingers grasp only salt water. My frustrated scream is lost in peals of angry thunder as the vicious battle between Thor, the god of thunder, and the world serpent carries violently on. Ragnarok. As the storm continues to rage, the surety of my fate becomes much clearer to me. I relax as the raging waters roll over me, ultimately accepting the inevitability of what is to come. I breathe in deeply, welcoming water into my lungs, my only thought that I may be one of the lucky ones. Soon, though, even that thought is lost as I sink deeper, my mind as black as the seas that embrace me so tenderly. Up upon the splintered hull of the vessel stands a man I once knew as Professor, but it only now that I realize his true name has been but a simple facade. Oleg. Flick the letters around, and he is Loki, the god of mischief, and the demented brother of the mighty Thor, and his sole purpose on this very fishing trip has been to bring about the end of the world by unleashing the world serpent himself, Ragnarok, where a woman in white will lead an army of demons as fires rage to consume the very soul of the earth. Down, down, down into the depths I fall, becoming lost forever to the world of men and gods and monsters.